Very distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Etanibi Alemika. Please, let's put our hands together.
Good morning. I will adopt the protocol. I think the most extensive one was was laid out by the Deputy Executive Secretary of NUC. And coming in here, I didn't know this before. It looks as if there is some kind of conspiracy in the entire organization of this program. Almost everybody knows each other. That's one thing I found interesting when I came in. And in my case particularly, I find myself in the midst of quite a lot of people. I don't want to be with them most of the time. In this role is somebody who taught me 45 years ago at the University of Ibadan, Professor Sogolo. And so I don't know whether, of course, it doesn't have a way of marking my performance today. So I'm not sure whether it will have an effect. And also, here is Alhaji Idi Farouk, who is my boss. I was a director in Mamsa Noah for about 5-6 years, and he was a DG. So if we are all asked to gather together as directors and DG, he will be on a different table and I will be on a different table. So again, you find even ongoing, my ultimate employer, Ministry of Education, is present. So again, when you are before the royal fathers, you don't know what you can do to offend them. So I think this is an interesting gathering in which all sectors of society are present. When I was invited, I was contemplating a different audience. Again, I think it's a good thing that the programmers and the organizers thought about the future, not the past. Because almost all of us on the high table here belong to the past, not even the present. And so they focus on the future of the country. So I'm just going to be very brief. Again, that's lesson learned from history. There was this story of a professor from one of our communities in the Southeast. It was at a lunch, and he was invited, and the man, as usual, went to his library, wrote 45-page lecture. And as he was giving the lecture, some people who understood what he was saying will clap for him. But the chief launcher was a young man who has made a lot of money, but nobody knows the source of the money, and he does not even understand English. So whenever they clap for this professor, he would ask the person, say, how much donation? And then they will say nothing, and then we say, yeah, man. So I think the story has been told among professors that when you are invited to this occasion, don't talk too much, because that's not what people come for. So I'm going to be addressing, we are talking about history. I'm going to be telling some history about myself. Let me start by recognizing, I start with that history. Recognizing the role of female teachers. I think we must thank you especially at the primary level. The best education I've had today, far better than the one Professor Sogolo gave me at the university, was a woman who taught me in primary 3 in 1961. That was a woman who taught me the history of slave trade. And I will never forget that story, that lesson. She just finished her primary school and was recruited to teach, in a village in the present Kogi state. And I'm sure, those who belong to my outgoing generation will remember, but she started that history lecture with a song, "Oh gracious God, see what the white man has done. Roll along to America." I think that was like a summary of the whole episode about slave trade. When that was concluded, when she ended the history of slave trade, She taught us another song that almost all of us know. Oh, my home, when shall I see my home? When shall I see my beautiful land? I shall never forget my home. Again, it tells us the patriotism of slaves even in the slave land. These two stories I've learned from this woman, and I will never forget. And like I said, it surpasses every education I've had, to the point where up to today, it forms the basis for my attitude towards outsiders vis-a-vis Nigerians. I'm one of the people, when I was finishing my doctorate degree in the 80s, there was nothing that was not done to make me remain in the US. And I just told my supervisor, I can't remain in this country, I'm going back home. Till today, people ask me, did you regret returning given what has happened in Nigeria? I tell them I've never regretted a second for returning home. That is the work probably done by a woman in primary 3 who taught me proper history. I can give an example. So our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, and our brothers, our fathers who teach in primary school, my heart go out to you every day. And I'm not playing to the gallery. I have said it repeatedly. I believe and I will not protest if primary school teachers are paid salary equivalent to the salary of professors. Because if you don't have a good primary education, all other levels of education will fall apart. Minister of Education is also here. I think one of the crises in the country today is the illogical reversal of what government responsibility towards education should be. A government is responsible for providing primary and secondary education on compulsory and free basis. Anything higher than that must be on the basis of cost recovery, providing scholarship to cover for those who cannot afford it. In a situation where it is cheaper, far cheaper to train a person at the university than it is in primary school, is illogical, is unpatriotic, and it is irresponsible of any government. That we have done since the 1980s, and it must stop. It must stop. So we need to begin to understand what should be done. You have free compulsory primary education, free and compulsory basic education. Thereafter, of course, you begin to charge, you begin to provide opportunity for tuition, for other kind of system. Again, we are running an education system that makes no sense. Again, I'm an ASU activist. I've been driven out of my house several times. So I believe in principles of negotiation, but also both the government of Nigeria, because these are topical issues that will affect our history. Both the government of Nigeria and ASU must be responsible to look at the agreement that we always bring out. I just went through accreditation in my university. At the end, one of the people who came to accredit, I will tell you she's still represented. He said, Prof, you don't have a secretary. That is part of the requirement. So I look at them and said, does it make sense for me to have a secretary? I said, I was part of the 1992 with Jega. I said, then we didn't know how to type. We were not supposed to know how to type. We didn't know anything. So we needed typists to assist professors to type their papers. I said, today it doesn't make sense. Instead of a secretary for a professor, what you need is a PhD candidate and a master candidate who are paid stipends, who are attached to professors. So I'm using this opportunity because the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Education is here, that we need to do a lot of rethinking because that influences our education. It is this kind of illogical reasoning, irrationality in our education system that led us to neglect history. Forgetting that history is actually the basis for development. We once had an erratic head of state who once asked, what is the value of education in humanities and social sciences? That is the greatest level of ignorance. A head of state say, why are you giving people humanities, education in humanities and in social sciences? Asking what is the value? That's the greatest level of ignorance. And yet, of course, a country where you can continue to parade yourself as saint. That head of state parades himself as a saint. Yet, when he wants to get a doctorate degree, he couldn't get it in physics, mathematics, and science. He got it in humanities, which he was criticized as being irrelevant. So, history is very important. I'll begin to summarize. Like I said, we learned from that professor that you should not talk much on this occasion. History and culture are closely related. We all know, young people, do you know what accountancy is? The subject that is closest to accountancy is actually history. What is it that accountants do? Two basic things: bookkeeping and auditing. You keep your book, the book is audited. What is history? You keep records, and people keep auditing those records you keep. Because there are genuine history, there are fake histories. And so you have to audit history. When your parent tells you stories at home, cross-check. Some of them may not be correct. Some of them may not be correct. Those that tells you that Hausas are always like this, Yorubas are always like this, Igbos are always like this, Bunus are always like this, Igalas are always like this, they always contain elements of falsehood. We are so similar to the extent that our differences are fewer than our commonalities. Have you known, do you know of any ethnic group in Nigeria that does not eat? Do you know anyone that does not want to have a place to sleep? Do you know anyone that wants to be sick and not get attention? Do you know anyone that does not want his life or her life to be better in future? So what is the difference between ethnic groups? We all like similar things, if not the same thing. We want to grow in the same way. So stories that we are told that people are like this, are like that, a lot of them are fake. A lot of them are based out of ignorance. So history and culture are closely related. Both history and culture, they shape and reflect our values. The values that we hold today are no longer our indigenous values. They are our values that we got from foreigners, and then we embrace them more than those that we receive from foreigners. I always tell people today, and I said, most of us pretend we are parents. We are just school fees payers. We are feeders, but we are not parents. Their parents are on the YouTube. Their parents are on the TV. The parents are on all those kind of channels. But we are the one who pay school fees. We are the one who feed. But their role models are not, or we are not the role models. And that is because we have forgotten history. Because we didn't start what these 2, 3, 4 started today, I just started, we did not start early. We forgot at some point to continue what was there before. Then look at conflict. I think I was telling my boss, Idi Farouk, some time ago. Not long ago, people were fighting over whether we needed cattle ranch. As if there were no cattle ranch in Nigeria. And I used to remind a number of people, under Northern region, there was actually a company called Northern Nigeria Livestock Production Company. And that company actually established ranches in Northern Nigeria. During Operation Feed the Nation 1976, I served in one of those ranches, located just out there in Manchok. Today, the ranch no longer exists, and people believe that ranch is not possible, that ranch is a southern agenda for the north, because we don't teach history. Because we don't teach history, and because we now prefer ignorance. So our values are related to our understanding of where we are coming from. Lack of attention to history of groups in Nigeria has created many false cases of divisions. Each time we sit down, those of you drink in beer parlors, that's one thing that my father helped me that I never learned to. I've never drank beer in my life. I drank palm wine because my village, we are actually supposed to grow to know how to tap palm wine. What I hear from my friend who drinks a lot is that they gain to understand that the whole knowledge that they think was, their own is actually everybody's own. I give you a good example. Do you know this native kola nut? Not the one that my boss Idi Farouk eats, the commercial one. The one with many lobes. The story around the Igbo says they are kola. Igala says they are. Do you know how many ethnic groups who say they are the owner of that kola? Almost every indigenous group that can plant because of their vegetation claim to own that kola nut. All of them that of course take it as part of rituals for bride price also claim it's their own. Because you cannot demand for something that do not belong to you. So if you listen to the story we tell each other, when we are not competing, when we are not fighting, you will see the similarity amongst us. You will see so much similarity. I will come to competition and then of course the lie we tell ourselves very soon. The fact that we have also undermined institutions and policies that bring people from different society or backgrounds together is part of the reason why our values are being eroded. It's part of the... So people are now growing up in a village and then going to secondary school in their village, going to university in their village, become teacher in the university, become professors, and they do not know what happens in the next state. And they become so parochial in the way that they defend my own versus their own. Can we bring back some kinds of policy? In addition to 60-30, whatever ratio is used, every university in Nigeria should be made and monitored that indeed they bring students together who are not from those geopolitical zones. Look at the quarrel about Unity School. Again, I was talking to a professor who was fuming that Zamfara, when you score 4%, I don't even know how it's calculated. You are admitted, but somebody scored 104%. It's not. I said, we can't score 104%. But the question I asked him at the end, you just told me these are Unity schools. They are not center of excellence. Unity schools are representational schools. They bring people together to learn from one another. They are not necessarily bringing the best, but they are unity promoting institutions. But because again we don't learn the history about evolution, we again attribute different things to them. So history is very important, even for the stability that we so much desire in the country. Another point I want to bring out is the fact that, do you notice the lack of national pride among our youth today, and in fact the adults? If I were to ask on this row, what is your best football? I'm sure 80% of this row will not mention a Nigerian football. What a disaster. In our homes, we are decorating with Arsenal, Manchester, Man U, Man World, Man that. Is it not a disgrace that there is nothing that is our own that we truly like? We must begin to question many of the things we do, which is becoming habitual. The young people, of course, they don't think that anything is possible. And you know why? We term everything in Nigeria as fake. Only that which comes from outside is better, and it's actually good. Yes, there are history of those who are the reason for that. It has not always been like that. So if we understand the history, we will say, when did the rain start beating us? When did our educational system started falling? When did we continue to have values that no longer talk about productivity but about sharing? Only history can tell us how we came to where we are. Of course, inadequate history in an era where there is the flooding of other people's culture promoted over and above us, our own, where do we expect our children to become? It is in this respect that we must thank the organizers of this occasion in which these books are being presented. And I do hope that they will be supported. To us elders, let me just give 5 posters and I see it. Can history give direction to Nigeria in her current desperate situation? Can it give us? You see, I listen to people, sadly many of them professors, they will tell you the mistake of 1914. And I say, what a stupid statement. We know the 1914 was the amalgamation of northern Nigeria and southern Nigeria. Before that amalgamation, there were dozens of amalgamations. That was not the first amalgamation. That was probably not the most important. It is because those amalgamations took place in which we have amalgamation that led to Oil Rivers Protectorate, Southern Nigeria, Niger Delta Protectorate, Southern Nigeria Protectorate, and also similar protectorate in Northern Nigeria, that it was possible to merge a larger protectorate together. So there wasn't that, but this is the lie we tell each other, that the mistake was 1914. If there was a mistake, it started in 1861 and was consummated only in 1914. History will have helped us to stop telling ourselves lies, to stop putting in the public and political space stories that are not correct, and of course that divide us, that you elites use in the prosecuting their war against the rest of us. Can history help us in addressing some of these? Can proper understanding of history, I just mentioned of slave trade. Again, when we talk about slave trade, we often talk about transatlantic slave trade. That is the one that moves from Africa towards America. There was a previous slave trade which went through Sahara, from Sahara to the Middle East and even to Europe. Again, we often forget, we have amnesia of that. We must begin to learn a history that is total, that is also representative of our experience. Can appreciation of history unite us and inspire us to build a nation? Can it? I believe it can. Because yes, there are cases of quarrels, war, and conflict amongst our people, but there was also more solid history of trade amongst our people, even before colonial rule. Can we build on those history? Of course, can a robust understanding of the way we dealt with conflict in the past help us to design a way to resolve conflict today? Can we learn anything from our indigenous institution by re-examining our history? I think we can, if we put an appropriate investment in place to do that. And I do hope this is the beginning of reclaiming our history. This is the beginning of reclaiming our national pride. And I want to thank the organizers for urging us to re-examine our attitude to our history, our attitude to our culture, because until we do that, we will continue to have this desperation, of course, even if you like, this inferiority complex that drives us today. Thank you so much.